Hello, everyone. I am Naveed Fauzi. Welcome. I am the Interim Director of the Middle East and North Africa Studies here at Bridgewater State University. I'm delighted to welcome my dear friends and colleagues, Dr. Jeren Ergenç, who is joining us from China, and Dr. Derya, whose last name I forgot, from Turkey. We are officially going to introduce them. And also, I would like to thank Dr. Chin, you for hosting this event, opening his class to the campus community. We are hoping that more people will join us. Before introducing our speakers, let me share a couple of flyers and a couple of announcements and share my screen while I'm doing that. As you know by now, the Middle East and North Africa studies have organized several talks and events, and we are here April 5th, and there are two events upcoming. One of them is about the Iran representation of Iranian women before the Islamic Revolution, and the other one is about the impact of Korean pop culture in Iran, which is co-sponsored or supported by the Asian studies as well. So the next upcoming events is one of them on representation of women in Iran. I put all these flyers in the chat, and also the other one, which is about North Korea. We will have Dr. Chin, you will give you more information about this event, which is coming tomorrow, collaboration between the Middle East and North Africa studies and Asian studies. And I put that in the chat as well. So before I hand it to Chin, let me say that we are thankful to all our co-sponsors, in particular, the Department of Education, whose grant we are using to organize these events. Chin, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming. And I think that we'll have more students coming in later on. I am not as organized as Dr. Naveed Fauzi. He is very organized and have all the programs listed and things like that. And very, very impressed. And also very happy to have the this session co-sponsored by Asian Studies. We have great speakers today from Turkey and one from China. And so I'm very, very honored and to have them, and also to have my students here. And actually, Michael Garifels is my student, and he's doing research and going to be a presenter at the Silk Road Conference on Thursday. So, he is going to benefit a lot from you, the speakers today. And we have some other students that are going to come in later, and also we have our instructor, Dr. Sean Allen here. He's taught the first session on humanities for the Asian Studies course that we are co-teaching. So we have a series of lectures and activities, and the one on Thursday is very important. Is our third conference on the Silk Road. We have the past two in this several years. This is our third. So we have speakers from BU, and I don't know that Jeren, you know him or not. He's Grant Road. He is the Asian Studies, Center, from Asian Studies Center. And then we have Habibi from the Middle East Center, Brandeis. And then we have some keynote speakers from one from Jordan and one from Iraq. So, and then we have faculty speakers panels and faculty, then the student panels. So it's a diverse session from different people and different backgrounds. And so I don't have more to say about that because we want to save some time for the speakers. So should I introduce Jeren first? Okay, Jeren Ernjink is an associate professor from Xi'an Jiaotong Liverpool University. And this university is a joint program and located in Suzhou near Shanghai. So it's a very famous program and a very successful program, one of the successful joint programs with foreign universities. And she was a assistant professor from also many famous Chinese universities, Beijing universities, Renmin universities, Fudan universities. And so these universities are very famous. So, and she got her PhD from BU and has a good connections with Boston, and with the area studies focus. Her research interests are comparative methodologies on her research. And so we are very excited to hear Dr. Jeren Ernjink.
Unmuting myself. Thank you so much and appreciate it. And I am delighted to introduce my dear colleague and friend, Dr. Darya Gujar, who is the chair of Area Studies and Middle East Studies at the Graduate School of Social Sciences at Middle East Technical University in Ankara, a graduate of METU, Middle East Technical University. Dr. Gujar obtained her master's and PhD degrees from London School of Economics, Department of International Relations. Dr. Gujar teaches several courses on the modern politics and international relations of the Middle East, as well as theory and research design in area studies. Her research interests include the transnational connections within and across areas, connections between states as well as societies. In parallel to her work on social movements, she also does voluntary and professional work in training civil society in Turkey. And she talked to us about her work last semester, particularly on methods of evidence-based advocacy. Dr. Gujar has written several articles on social movements and international relations in the Middle East. She recently co-authored a book chapter on Turkey's BRI engagement and its impact on Turkey's state transformation with Dr. Ergenç. And it is forthcoming in 2022, published by Palgrave, and co-authored article on Iran's BRI engagement with Meliha Al-Tunishik, which is under review in 2000 and will come out this year. Please join me welcoming the speakers, and the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Navid. Thank you, Chian. So we thought we will divide this with Jeren. We thought I'll present and she will lead the Q&A session. And with that purpose in mind, I am sharing my screen. Yes, sorry. And I'll move on to presenters view. Sorry, yes. So I'll try to keep this under 30 minutes. Our departure points, why did we start studying Turkey, BRI, China, etc.? There are two dimensions to our interest in this issue. One is we want to understand, of course, how China's this big initiative, Belt and Road Initiative, how it's developing and what it's doing, the impact that it leaves on different countries, on different regions as it develops, and as it changes also style and course, because there has been some years by now to the initiative, and it has been changing its course, and it's also very adaptive to local environments. So we were interested in that. But we were also interested in something as, as scholars interested in Turkey. How is Turkey's transformation as BRI is advancing and involving Turkey? How is Turkey's ongoing domestic transformation interacting with that? Because Turkey has been through an authoritarian turn. That has been the case in the last decade, and that has taken a legal form as well in the transition to the presidential system from a more parliamentarian system. Semi-presidentialism, sometimes I call it. So there is that underlying argument when scholars studies China in the Middle East, especially China and Turkey more particularly, that there is an impact of China towards Turkey's authoritarian turn, and that is the fact that it is facilitating, to some extent, making it easier, smoother for that authoritarian turn to happen, as China does not put any democratic conditioning to Belt and Road Initiative. And it is financing this authoritarian turn, at least partially financing. That is how it's discussed in the literature. In the literature, it is discussed that there is Turkey sort of staying away from the Western alliance, whether in the form of, a commitment to NATO, commitment to EU accession process, how that is all facilitated with the China's existence and the availability of funds and, investment opportunities through Belt and Road Initiative. Previously, we studied this. We studied this under how BRI actually impacted Turkey's authoritarian turn, which we look at from the angle of Turkey's informalization. We are interested in how more informal Turkish politics has gotten as it went through this authoritarian turn. We will talk about what we mean by informalization. And we look at this in two sectors: how Belt and Road Initiative invests in the energy sector and in the transport sector of Turkey, and how that helped Turkey to informalize further. We did that, and then we were more interested in the other side of the equation, and that is, as Turkey became more informalized, as Turkish politics became more informalized, and Turkish state-business relations became more informalized, how that had an impact on Turkey's BRI engagements, right? Because usually these things are two ways, and if one impacts the other, chances are there's the other side of the equation. Sorry. Methodologically, there were some issues, some decisions to be made while we went on about it, and that is studying political informality, finding evidence for it is difficult, is elusive. So you need to find stuff in the real life that people wouldn't be proud about writing, right? They wouldn't be documenting it that easily, and perhaps under authoritarian turn in the country, they wouldn't perhaps feel so safe talking about it. So we chose a technical issue, as technical as it can get. And in this case, our case is Kum Port. It's a port in Istanbul. And we were interested in the Chinese investment in that port. So once you choose such a technical issue to study all these interlinkages, then it's safer for everyone to discuss, whether they are stakeholders from the business sector, whether they are part of the bureaucracy or the political elite. Then it becomes like a technical issue of who gets to profit, how can it be optimized, etc. Then the language becomes safer to discuss, instead of saying, do you think Turkey gets more authoritarian with more Chinese investments, right? So that is a less safer question. Whereas how do you view the Kum Port investments, the safer question. It's a micro case study. The time period is very appropriate because the purchase, 3 Chinese companies have come together in a consortium and bought a Turkish port in Istanbul, and it is at the very same time that Turkey went through the systemic change of the presidential system, change its laws, constitutions, etc. So there is a nice temporal coincidence, or is it a coincidence? There is a nice temporal element to discuss, and we did a lot of elite interviews in order to find primary data on the issue. Now I'm going to talk a bit, for those who don't know Turkish politics, what has exactly changed, what do we mean by authoritarian turn as these investment was happening. There is, with the change to presidential system, it's almost like a double government, in the sense that there is a new bureaucracy, presidential bureaucracy. It has a place, physical place, there is a palace called, Beştepe Palace. And in there is all these offices that were previously just under the jurisdiction of the ministries. And they do more or less the same jobs, but not exactly. They are not exact mirrors. And in all this, the hierarchy of decision-making has changed. And unfortunately, the new decision-making processes are not as laid out as the ones before. So there is a lot of ambiguity and sort of fuzzy-fuzziness as who will now get to decide what. If China wants to invest and is going to approach Turkey, for example, as that's the case under Belt and Road Initiative, right? China gets to invest, all Chinese companies. How will they go on about this process? Who will they first consult? Is it the Ministry of Transportation if they're going to buy a port, or is it the President's office? And who will get to have the technical expertise for it? Is it the area desk in the ministry, like Ministry of Transportation and regarding seaports, etc.? Or is it under Ministry of Foreign Affairs? Is it the China desk? Is it the Asia desk? Or the new presidential directorates? Is it to them, the new presidential advisors, right? No one really knows how it's supposed to happen because it's a transition, right? It hasn't settled yet, especially at the time and the development of this purchase. So looking at the purchase was a good mirror was a good window to look into the decision-making processes. Yes, so there has been this decoupling of the president's office and the usual ministerial bureaucracy, and then a lot of overlapping policy making. And then we see that a lot of informality, right? So there is not formal procedures in place. But is this informality an unintended consequence of the transition to presidential system, or is it actually a form of governing? And the theoretical argument is informality is actually a tool in the hands of the state officials. It's not just because they are clumsy. It's not because they haven't thought this through. It's precisely because they have thought this through and they see a lot of new room of maneuvering if there are more informal processes that they can use. And we will show the example in Comport, concrete example. So this has been our fieldwork. 12 elite interviews, of course, a lot of desk research on coupling that, bureaucrats from key ministries, civil society. We have thrown different snowballs into executives from Turkish and Chinese logistic companies that dealt with Comport, that had first-hand knowledge of the issue. And why have we chosen Comport? There is a rule. This is the Belt and Road Initiative, the global map, and you can see Istanbul. Between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, a port is supposed to be part of this blue road, the maritime road, and then there are the land routes, the northern corridor, the middle corridor, etc. Going back to Comport, maritime routes are at least a big chunk of the Belt and Road Initiative. So ports are important, seas are important. A lot of international trade, a lot of international freight is actually through seas, and sea freight is a particularly important part of foreign trade in Turkey. So it's not just important for Belt and Road Initiative, but it's also very important for Turkey. And ports are connected to railway freight because you need railways and ports to be connected so there can actually be a constant flow of the supply chain. Otherwise, they will sit long in a port, right? And this is one of the biggest Chinese investments under the Belt and Road Initiative. It's $940 million, and they bought 65% of the shares of that port. And that's also interesting. It's almost like a negative case because thereafter there is a significant decrease in Chinese investment in Turkish logistics. So we have to look what has happened there. That's Comport. This is Istanbul, and Comport is there in the Marmara Sea, connecting the Black Sea, Marmara, and Aegean. So what we have found through the fieldwork, we have actually seen concretely an informalization process just after the Comport purchase. And we've seen the impact of that for the future Chinese investment. We've seen that this particular investment is not optimized in terms of profit for the Chinese companies, and they have bought this as a profit-making enterprise, of course, and ports are particularly known to be high-profit enterprises. And the second negative impact of the informalization process is the port's importance within the larger network of Belt and Road Initiative, within the linkages, logistic linkages, is not optimized at all. So the port didn't become as significant as it was supposed to be. And then Turkey's general importance then within Belt and Road Initiative is not as optimized as Turkish policymakers wanted to be, right? So the three main findings of informalization, the indicators through which we looked at informalization, is the legal framework of port management, how the new legal framework has been developing, and who made those decisions, how those decisions were made, and how much they actually damage profits of Turkish and Chinese stakeholders. Second, the policy changes with regards to railways, because you need railway development for a port to develop. And so any obstacle there due to informalization is going to impact ports' impact. And then general informalization of general state business relations, whether with Chinese companies or Turkish companies. So concretely in the laws regulating, in our fieldwork, there is this one phrase that all our informants use again and again: overnight. That's the phrase: overnight, overnight. So how has the ports, the laws regulating port management changed? And the answer is overnight. We didn't even know it was going to change. We just woke up one morning and the customs law had changed, the port management law had changed, all the important laws, legalities regulating a port management had changed. It was unpredictable. It was very sudden. It was without any prior consultation with the stakeholders, civil society stakeholders, whether Chinese or Turkish, or with the experts within the ministries most of the time. And contrary to previous state traditions of Turkey would indicate there would be a commission within the parliament discussing this multilaterally. Even if there were commissions established, sometimes those commissions didn't even know that law was going to change tomorrow, right? So there is that fuzziness of this new transition to a new system, governance system, that informal realm gives you that room of maneuver, because there's a lot of authority, of course, centralized in the office, in the president's office. So with the presidential decree, things can change overnight. And that is anxiety inducing to the stakeholders of the BRI in Turkey. So concretely, what has changed: how port services are managed, how much profit they can make. There were ceiling prices initiated to the port management. Which companies are allowed into the port management, and how many of those companies were tied. Again, a phrase that many of our informants kept on using: the family, meaning the informal ties around the president, not necessarily always blood-related family. And suggestions for new laws that were coming from civil society, from associations of business people, were always listened to. There's a kind understanding, that the state is open to the stakeholders. The state listens, the state gives appointments, gives audience, but does not do anything. It just listens and politely sends back. All this made Turkish ports very less competitive. Competitive, of course, with regards to other countries in the Mediterranean, right? Especially the Greeks, the Italians, the Egyptians, etc. With railways, there is a significant lack of investment in railway freight, in the updating of railway equipment, that all that was promised in many ways as this port was being purchased by the Chinese, and all that was not materialized. Turkish railways have been privatized recently, just prior to this purchase, and there was the optimism in the air that as railways is privatized, there would be investment in it, and that will make Turkey a bigger part of Belt and Road Initiative, and through port connections, etc. But the way it was privatized, it was even in a very informal manner. It was not open to many of the stakeholders from the relevant sectors, and the chunk of the privatization went to a certain group, Pacific Group, which is again part of the bigger family, right? So state business relations informalized even further. By the way, all these that I'm telling were contested by the business associations. They actually, tried to open cases in the courts against these legal changes or against the manner of privatization. Some of the cases are still ongoing in the courts. So that has been contested. It has not been uncontested. And then there is a general informalization that we have found. For example, the transit cost and custom processes are not really, are not optimized to the level of integrating Turkey to either Belt and Road Initiative or even integrating Turkey to be a better part of European supply chains, right? And there is not just enough sort of technical expertise being inbuilt to the decision-making processes. Again, as we found due to informalization, relevant ministries that can provide that technical expertise are incapacitated. There is another phrase that they use a lot, is the strong ministry. If the ministry has a strong minister, by strong they mean having better ties to the president, being higher in the hierarchy, then that minister and the bureaucracy of that ministry gets higher ranking, although perhaps it is not as relevant to the issue as another ministry. So if the Minister of Transportation is not a strong man or a woman, then although it is very relevant for this particular purchase under BRI, he or she won't be listened to, right? There's a high turnover of bureaucrats in general. By turnover, we mean there's a lot of firing and hiring and juggling around bureaucrats so that they don't get to build enough expertise and build enough acquaintance with these stakeholders, whether Chinese or Turkish. There is that, of course, with the promise with presidential system was, we're going to be faster, quicker in decision-making and execution than parliamentarian system. Parliamentarian system takes so much energy because there's so many discussions in the parliament, whereas the presidential system will be more centralized and it will lead to quicker decision-making. In many ways it is, because laws are being changed overnight. But in other ways, when decision-making needs to be happening, but it's not in the priority of the president at the time, then it's way slower. Compared to the parliamentarian system. Ministers are sometimes absent in parliament. They are not even there to question on issues of port management, port purchase, Chinese investments, etc., all creating further ambiguity. So the result is presidential bureaucracy is uninstitutionalized and unaccountable. Decision-making process is very sudden, unpredictable. There is family ties lurking around, and all that. These BRI engagements before, especially big Chinese investments regarding infrastructural projects such as highway construction or energy construction, they had enabled this elite to informalize, because this political elite says, see, we are able to attract money, we are able to attract financing, we can do these big projects, we can develop Turkey in a manner that Turkey has not developed before. But then, as they informalize further and change into this presidential system, we see that it has then a slowing down effect on further BRI engagements. Of course, this is limited to the sector that we analyze, that is the logistics sector. But then again, logistics sector is at the heart of Belt and Road Initiative, right? As the initiative that is supposed to connect, especially through logistics. So we find this a significant finding. And yes, I'm finished. Although Ceren is there, okay.
I was having trouble unmuting myself. Thank you so much, I appreciate it. I guess we go to Ceren now.
We can start the Q&A and then, start the discussion, right, Ceren?
All right, then.
Yeah, I'm just gonna respond to questions. So,
all right, then. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Lots of information regarding the political structure, the transformation, informality, and all that. But let's open it to the students, and we take questions from students first, and then if there are other questions. If there are no questions from our students, let's see if my colleagues have any questions. Dr. In-Kyung Kim has joined us from Political Science Department as well. Welcome. Good to see you here, In-Kyung.
Michael, I think you have a question, right?
Yes, so essentially looking back, like the three like parts of the system that you talked about, how why is it unpredictable, sudden, how like like you said, overnight, how like why is that important to the Belt and Road Initiative?
Thank you. So this question have two parts. One part is about like why the transition from the parliamentary system to the presidential system actually causes the informality, this overnight thing, and the second one, how it affects the BRI. So let me briefly answer the first one and take this is an opportunity to talk more about Turkey's place in the BRI. So that might be an opening for further discussion as well. So for the first part, the parliamentary system was more conducive to checks and balances and division of powers in Turkey. And with the presidential transition to the presidential system, we witness a centralization of political power and a decline in the checks and balances system. So the presidential bureaucracy was established in a way as like a parallel bureaucracy or like a shadow bureaucracy almost to bypass the traditional ministerial bureaucracy. Like imagine like the Minister of Transportation in our case, right? That's there are career bureaucrats who know the rules and regulations and the history of all these bilateral agreements and everything. And then suddenly they were bypassed, they were cut out of the decision-making circles and the presidential bureaucracy. And at times we don't even know who the bureaucrats are in this system. And even if we know who they are, we don't know how much how much they're involved in the decision-making processes. And here, what our response called the family comes in the picture. So it's everybody's impression, both the business elite, but also the bureaucratic elite on the ministerial side, that even the presidential bureaucrats don't have a much say in the decision-making processes, but it's actually those who are in the very close circle of the president himself are able to participate in the decision-making process, which makes it very non-transparent, very opaque, right? And that's why, for example, these like frequent changes in the regulation, the port regulations, no one in the traditional state system knows who makes the decisions, why, for what purpose, and whatnot. And so when the ministerial bureaucrats, let's say, hear about the changes in the regulations at the same time with the business elites, let's say, that's contributes to the anxiety of all the stakeholders involved. Right? And the Turkish stakeholders are definitely anxious, both this bureaucratic elite and the business elite. And our argument about BRI, now I'm coming to the second part of your question, that we argue that creates an anxiety on the Chinese side too. That specifically in the Kumport case, the Chinese partners of Kumport, the CEO of Kumport told us that the Chinese partners of Kumport already have expressed their concern about this lack of transparency and unpredictability of the presidential decision-making system. And the actual outcome, the consequence of it, which is like these regulations that change overnight, and at the expense of the profitability of Kumport, most practically. You know, these are just not like only like normative concerns about Turkey's political system, but they're like a very practical consequences for the profitability of Kumport. Kumport is now functioning under its potential because of these regulations, basically. Right? And the Chinese are staying in only because they see it as a short-term investment, basically, right? So now, at this point, I want to like make one more step and talk about Turkey's place in the BRI. So to say the like our conclusion at the beginning that we think that Turkey is actually relatively excluded from the BRI. In its own region, meaning the Eastern Mediterranean region, which includes partially Southern and Southern Europe. And well, if you extend, maybe you can include CEE countries too, Central and Eastern European countries too, and the MENA countries, North African and Middle Eastern countries, including the Gulf countries, right? So if we see Turkey's region as such, we claim that Turkey is excluded from China's plans for the Eastern Mediterranean within the BRI, because EastMed is one of China's BRI's priority regions now. And we can talk about the reasons behind that, like, with the US withdrawal from the Middle East, China is having a Middle East pivot and whatnot, and Eastern Mediterranean definitely is one of the priority areas. And we see a lot of important, geostrategically important investments in this region, in the Gulf countries, in Egypt, in Israel, in Southern European countries and whatnot. And Turkey, in the last decade, has repeatedly lost its quest to get a share in one of these geostrategically important long-term investments. Like when China was deciding where to have ports, and like now Israel has Haifa, and then Greece has Prey, and whatnot. Turkey tried to put Mersin and Izmir ports in there, and they're actually geographically speaking perfect positions, right, for China. But no, both these ports lost their quest, right? And similarly, Turkey has been trying to put its own middle corridor into China's road part of the Belt and Road, like the northern corridor, middle corridor, and the southern corridor, right? And China has been incorporating Turkey's middle corridor into the BRI, right? That's excluded from there too. And last but not the least, is also has been excluded, and now, like, recently trying to catch up with the major investments in China's two priority industry investment policies, digital technologies and green technologies. EastMed is one of the, let's say, pilot regions for China's green investments. The Gulf countries, the eco-cities in the Gulf countries, and the huge Aswan solar park that is building in Egypt, for example. They are like these flagship investments, right? And Turkey, again, has been trying to attract this investment to no avail, right? And the reason for that is, even though China doesn't have like political conditionality, like democracy and whatnot, to invest in other countries, it does have this conditionality of political stability, either in the target country or in the bilateral relations. Like Lebanon, for example, again, going back to the EastMed region, lost its place in China's BRI in the region because of its own political instability. Right, but Turkey, not because of its own political instability, though went through its own had its own share of political instability in the recent past. But one reason why China is hesitant to involve Turkey fully in the BRI is the instability of the bilateral relations due to the Uyghur issue, and Turkey's ambivalent attitude towards the Uyghur issue. Right, that's one thing, but there's a historical continuity in that. More recently, we argue that what we call political informality, as I explained earlier to the first half of your question, the lack of transparency, unpredictability, and at times irrationality actually makes Turkey a politically unstable place to invest economically or to include in the long-term BRI plans for China.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jaren, Dr. Ergenç. Let's see if there are other questions. Yes, please, Dr. Kim.
Thank you so much. I apologize, I was late, but I was trying to catch up your presentation through the Q&A session. I think, I think I'm getting it. Thank you so much. I have one very specific question related to informalization of the BRI in Turkey, and one general question about the bureaucracy in Turkey, because it is really related to Asian bureaucracy in general. So my first question, do you mean by informalization more like privatization, not led by the government, but by the private companies? No. Okay, I got it. Thank you. I was not sure the informalization. My second question, you mentioned high turnover of bureaucrats. Interestingly, it is very common in Asian countries. The China, Japan, and Korea, South Korea, they have maximum 3 years turnover regulations. So one bureaucratic member cannot stay within one department or one division of their ministries. And I interviewed a lot of government officials in those countries, and I learned the reason why they practice that kind of high turnover of bureaucrats is to prevent corruption. I'm wondering if Turkey has the same kind of practices for the same reasons, or so I was very surprised to hear about the high turnover of the bureaucrats in Turkey, seeing Turkey as part of Asia in terms of the kind of the mentality. Over the, they put more priority for the, prevention of corruption over the proficiency or more professionalism, because they can build up their capacity and skills within the same branch, like Western bureaucrats. So I want to hear about your insights about their bureaucracy in general. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. These are really interesting questions. So we both shaked our hands, when you asked about informality, but let me, put some words in there too. So what we mean with informality is not privatization or outsourcing to private actors, but as I partially answered to Michael's question, the undermining of checks and balances and increasing lack of transparency and predictability, and because the presidential bureaucracy intentionally declines to inform the public about the decision-making processes, and also the formal channels of informing the public, the general public, doesn't exist for the presidential bureaucracy. That's one thing, the institutional part. But the lack of communication between the presidential bureaucracy and the ministerial bureaucracies is also not fully institutionally defined, and the presidential bureaucracy uses this ambiguity, this legal institutional ambiguity, to intentionally cut the ministerial bureaucracies out of the decision-making processes, which creates a black box effect at the end of the day, that a black box in the presidential palace, even physically, makes the decisions, and we being like everyone else, including the ministerial bureaucrats, hearing about the decisions after the fact, basically. So that's what we mean with informality. One question we had before, maybe I should just preemptively answer that question too. So we were told, rightly so, that all bureaucratic interactions involve a certain level of informality, right? Some bureaucrats, diplomats have the right to the discretion when they go to international meetings, for example, right? Like they can have behind the doors meetings and then make decisions on the spot based on these off the record meetings and everything. So that's a form of informality as well. But again, the way we define informality in this specific case is not the discretionary power of the otherwise accountable bureaucrats, but an institutional informality deliberately created to create this black box effect, basically. So that's one thing. The second thing about like your comparison with the Asian bureaucracies is actually really, really good. I work on China, and yeah, so like comparing the bureaucracies in this way was actually really, really insightful. Thank you for that. And I agree with many parts of it because the Turkish bureaucracy also has, I'm just going to compare with China to be safe, you know, that's my comfort zone. So Turkey also has this big civil examination, civil servant examination system to get into the bureaucracy, very centralized exam. And after that, as you said, once you are in one of the bureaucracies, then you switch back and forth between different desks. So it's exactly as you said, like the same idea, right? And the reason for that, I suppose, is like to prevent corruption, right? And the consequence of it, in my observation, when I look at Turkey's Asia policy, which I did previously in one of my previous works, and that was my argument that the lack of expertise actually prevents Turkey from developing a well-grounded Asia policy. Right? And the reason why the Chinese bureaucracy and diplomatic circles lack this expertise on Asia is exactly what you said, right? Because no one actually spends their career in one single issue area or an area desk. They are sent from one desk to the next one in really short intervals, right? Which prevents the accumulation of knowledge and experience. Right? There is that, but with the introduction of the presidential system in Turkey, we also see an additional layer of the changes in the bureaucracy beyond this, like, you know, structural issues, which is the bureaucrats fall out of grace in the eyes of the black box. Sitting in the presidential palace, the president himself and what is called the family. So there's a high turnover rate for the high-level bureaucrats, both in the presidential bureaucracy and in the ministerial bureaucracies as well, is due to these like very personalized relations with the president and his family, basically, his close circle.
Thank you so much. That's so interesting. Thank you.
Questions from students? Thomas?
I don't have any questions.
How about Mohit?
I'll have a
You usually
sorry.
have good questions. Mohit, go on.
Okay.
Okay.
Is this gonna impact? Oh, I have a question.
Mm.
I actually haven't attended class on time because I know I had problems going on Zoom, but I can assure you that that the presentation was really nice. I liked it very much.
Thank you so much, Mohit.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
Yeah. Okay. I have a question. You said that the interest of China is decreasing because, they are the relation, they have, concentrate more on the Mediterranean ports. But I think the Comport port is strategically located and leading to the Black Sea. So what is their reason of this decreasing interest? Is it because of the location or their policies, or because of the conflicts with the Xinjiang province and how the government trying to deal with this issue?
We think the decreasing interest in Turkey, even though Turkey is in a strategic position for China in the region, is both of these political reasons. One is the long-standing issue of the Uyghur issue and Turkey's ambivalent attitude towards China about that. And second, the political informality of the current presidential system that makes even the economic relations unpredictable for China. And we see that in the Comport case, definitely. In purely economic terms, even though, yes, as you said, Comport is in a good place between Asia and Europe, right? Even the Chinese companies themselves avoid Comport today and use Pre, for example, and other ports in Southern Europe, because Comport is too unpredictable and too costly, basically, for the Chinese companies to use Comport, even though it is owned by the Chinese, is too costly. It's costlier than using other alternative European ports. So in this sense, Comport, I think the Comport investment resembles to other what I call the dead investments. I don't know if it's a business term. You are the business person. That's my own term. But the dead investments, which is like of China for short-term gain purposes. Let me explain what I mean with that. So, as you know, BRI is not like a centrally organized and a top-down system, right? It's a hub and spoke system with China at the center and the target countries at the ends of the spokes, right? And it's a project-based. So like whoever comes up with a good project, gets the money, implements the project, right? And these actors that can suggest projects can be either the target countries, private sector, governments and whatnot, but also within China, the SOEs, private companies are also actors, right? So some of the BRI investments are motivated to fulfill China's long-term strategic goals, like the ones in East Med, in Egypt or in the Gulf countries, for example. They are really long-term projects, right? Like in the Gulf countries, for example, China is basically practically preparing the Gulf countries to a post-oil world, right? So it's a very long-term strategic investment. But there are some the short-term investments, not for these strategic purposes, but to save the day for the ailing SOEs, state-owned enterprises back home. And we see like some contradictory investments in the region, and I think the explanation for that is again the profitability of the SOEs, like Shanghai Electric, for example, which is one of the partners of the Aqua Group in the Gulf countries that invest in the cutting edge green technologies, solar, wind technologies, comes to Turkey and invests in outdated coal technologies in Adana Hunuplu, which cannot be used in 20 years, right? So it is only a way to, help Shanghai Electric to to get rid of its cash overflow. And similarly, the Gurjobal Group is the main solar company that builds the Aswan solar plant in Egypt. Super big project, strategic investment, goes to Serbia and again invest in coal plants, which are going to be out of commission in 2 decades, right? So these are all different motivations for different investments. And Turkey gets these short-term gain investments like Kumport or this coal plant in Adana in the southern region of Turkey.
May I add just a few sentences? Kumport is strategic, yes, and unfortunately, this new war between Russia and Ukraine, the war is unfortunate, but Turkish policymakers today see it as an opportunity to revitalize the middle corridor that they couldn't really integrate to Belt and Road Initiative. And Kumport then will become significant in the fact that all the traffic that was going through land, through Russia, Ukraine, etc., reaching Europe, may now go through the Black Sea, as opposed to that land corridor, through the Black Sea to Marmara to Aegean, then leading to this more modern European ports, right? So I know Jeren and I, we were participant observers in a business meeting, and we heard firsthand that Kumport is maybe now overflowing because of that. But you don't know how long the war will be. We hope it's going to be short, and you don't know the long-lasting impacts of it on the BRI structure. But there might be a new opening for Turkey to make itself more significant. But that doesn't mean that Turkey will change in all the other criteria that we've been mentioning, and Jenan has been elaborating further, right? Such as the informality, the decision-making process, the lack of economic rationality. What looks like to the outside actors is a diminishing of economic rationality. So just that there is an opportunity doesn't mean that opportunity will be seized. That's another disclaimer that I like to add to my own note. Okay.
Thank you very much.
That's a very good point there. Yeah, the other example for that, like the impact of the war, is on the middle corridor, right? So the middle corridor was pretty much dead before the war, but when the northern corridor is closed now for the foreseeable future, everybody is talking about revitalizing. Everybody is talking about the routes, China's trade routes to Europe will be pushed down to south, right, to the middle corridor, and then even further down to the Mediterranean. And yeah, in that meeting that Diana attended, everybody was talking about this is the day for the middle corridor, and then it's finally coming and all that. And then indeed, the Turkish bureaucracy acted on it and started negotiations again with the countries on the middle corridor, the Central Asian countries. But the negotiations are stalled again because even though everybody realized the need for revitalizing the middle corridor, the disagreements over the regulations and the lack of infrastructure, both in terms of the railroads and the actual cars and containers and whatnot is there. And it's not something that you can make up for from today to tomorrow. So again, going back to Daria's point of opportunities, having the opportunities and sizing them can be two different things.
That's good. That's great. And I have a question here that from Hugh Mohit, and he is asking both of you, do you think Turkey can succeed economically in the long run without China's help? Because in the middle corridor, I can understand that question. That's basically advocated by the Turkish government, but China is very, very good at those rebuilding railways, infrastructure buildings, a lot of technologies, probably the most advanced. So could they succeed, like Mukit said, without Chinese help?
And also, I want to point out, like, why would they favor China over other countries in terms of infrastructure and economic development, and why not other countries, like including the West? Because I know countries like the Netherlands, Switzerland, Germany, who have like the most innovative infrastructures in the world, and most of the tunnels are built by Swiss construction firms. But why would they go for China?
Why would Turkey
also-
go for China?
Yeah, not for other countries for infrastructure development in like Germany, or because they're close to Turkey, they're much closer to Turkey than China is. So why would they favor that country over other countries? Or I would say, why would they favor the China instead of the West? I suppose.
Turkey doesn't have a unilateral policy towards China, so perhaps unlike other regional countries like Egypt, for example, like for Egypt today, China is, as you said, the most important international partner, right? For Turkey, China is not necessarily the most important one. The EU is still the most important one, actually, in terms of both trade and also the investment and infrastructure development as well. So the European countries, but Germany in particular, is the main partners, main economic partners for Turkey. It is trying to diversify its portfolio by inviting Chinese investments for, well, one obvious reason is China has the money, right? And everybody's trying to get a share from this BRI, this abundant BRI loans, right? Funds. So that's one reason, and the other one is to diversify its economic relations and to be able to have a more balanced foreign economic policy, because especially in the last decade, Turkey's foreign policy with the major Western powers like the United States and the EU got more and more confrontational, and there have been words about even sanctions at times, right? Due to different military actions and some corruption cases and whatnot. So China is a plan B for Turkey, basically, and there has been a talk about Turkey leaving the so-called Western Bloc and joining the Asian countries for, I think, now more than a decade. So-called Turkey's Asia pivot, right? Like Turkey is gonna withdraw its membership request to the EU and will switch to Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or it has been trying to be a observing partner in ASEAN or Eurasian Economic Union, and all sorts of Asian regional organizations, but for the reasons I answered in Young's question, actually, that Turkey doesn't have the state capacity to make such a shift from the Western Bloc, the NATO membership, the EU membership quest, to become like an in the Asian Bloc, let's say, if we can, speak of an Asian Bloc, let's say, Turkey is not capable of making this shift. And also because practically there's like membership process, Turkey's membership quest for the EU is a prolonged and now seemingly impossible process. But in the meantime, Turkey has become a part of the greater European area, which means that all the state systems are integrated into the EU system. Like everything, the regulations, trade, education, social policies, legal system, everything is in the EU system, even though it is not a formal member of the EU. So that's also a very legal institutional obstacle for Turkey to just leave the Western Bloc and become a part of the so-called Asian bloc, let's say. And like one of the reasons why this middle corridor cannot be accomplished is because Turkey belongs to the EU system, whereas the other members or the other countries on the middle corridor, the Central Asian countries and China, are not. Right, and Turkey cannot leave the EU system of like railroads and transportation, even for the sake of this middle corridor that it really wants to see happening.
May I add just a few anecdotes? When we say the EU system and the other systems, what do we mean by is there is sort of centimeters that is required for railroads, right? How wide they should be, how long they should be, etc. So when you switch from Georgia to Turkey, right, the railroad, the centimeter of the railroad, the width of it is different. So even that switch is difficult. And or the locomotives that China produces that Turkey wants to buy, and it would help Turkey perhaps with upgrading of its railways. But the EU standards of a locomotive is different than the Chinese standards of a locomotive. So if Chinese standard locomotive is cheaper, like half the time cheaper, and China produces both EU standards and China standards for everybody to buy, right? But Turkey cannot afford to buy actually the cheaper one, because then the locomotives won't be compatible with EU locomotives, right? So when we say integrated to EU, we mean it is, it's a very detailed and concrete manner integration.
Okay, I have a question here from Devin. So Devin, can you ask the question?
Or we just read the question. If you can't turn on your mic, it's a really good question, because there is xenophobia in Turkey, actually, because of the Uyghur issue. Yeah, so there is
just a second. Sorry, Jaren. First, if you would please state the question. And also, I wanted to say that we have to finish in 5 minutes since this is a class. Sorry, interrupting, please.
Okay. So I'm reading the question out loud. How is xenophobia manifested in Turkey? Does the BRI help China's image in Turkey among citizens? So there is xenophobia in Turkey, and the reason for that is the Uyghur issue. So the Uyghurs, I don't know, for those of you who are not familiar with the topic, the Uyghur minority in China is a Turkic-speaking, Turkic ethnicity, Turkish-speaking Muslim minority, and they have historical ties with Turkey. And there have been waves of migration from Xinjiang to Turkey, starting with the immediate aftermath of the 49 revolution in China, and then during the Cold War years, and then after the end of the Cold War and the reform and opening up. So that created generations of Uyghur diaspora in Turkey. And when after the end of the Cold War, Soviet Union, Warsaw Pact countries and whatnot, when the Uyghur, what is the formal name of the organization? The Uyghur Independence Organization, the formal name, I think, I'm not sure about the formal name. It was established in Turkey. The headquarters were in Istanbul. And the leaders were based in Istanbul, right? And Turkey, the Turkish governments chose to support the Uyghur diaspora and their political goals for a long time, instead of establishing good relations with the Chinese state. And that continued up until late 90s, early 2000s, actually, when the Chinese government of the time decided that having good relations with the Chinese state is better for will better serve Turkey's national interests, and deported. Well, at that point, the first generation diaspora leaders already passed away, and the Turkish state deported the younger generation of diaspora leaders. So the Uyghur diaspora basically moved on to Germany, Australia, and other places after that. And Turkish state made a pledge to the Chinese state, let's say, that it supports the One China principle and non-intervention into China's foreign policy principle of non-intervention into domestic affairs and whatnot. But the Uyghur diaspora still retains a lot of political and cultural power in Turkey. Like the reason why the current the political party in power, AKP, has this ambivalent attitude towards the Uyghur issue is because the Uyghur diaspora is one of the support bases of AKP in Turkey, and that's why they have this contradictory attitude towards the Uyghur issue in China, and also culturally speaking, there's a lot of support for the Uyghur cause in Turkey, both from different parts of the political spectrum, actually. So that creates a anti-China feeling in Turkey, and that's one of the reasons why China doesn't actually have a high visibility in Turkey. Like the Confucius Institutes, for example, they keep a low profile and don't have like really visible public events in fear of retaliation. Retaliation meaning like, you know, protests and whatnot by the Uyghur diaspora or the pro-Uyghur groups, segments in the Turkish society. So yeah, in this case, yeah, there's this like this, you know, this social cultural issue between Turkey and China too. And does the BRI help China's image in Turkey among citizens? That's a very interesting question. I got a question the other day in a talk from a Turkish person saying that, so the question was like, the BRI like started off as if like it was going to be a big thing, but it turned out to be nothing. What do you think about it? And I'm like, it didn't turn out to be nothing. But then it occurred to me that it is so not visible in Turkey that nobody talks about the BRI in Turkey, that this Turkish person is under the impression that like BRI, is nothing now. So yeah, so the BRI is not like discussed in Turkish public opinion as much as it is discussed in other neighboring countries, let's say. Like the CE countries, like 17+1 countries or the East Med countries. So in this sense, China doesn't have much visibility in Turkish public opinion, relatively speaking. So Muhit's question I'm reading out loud.
Wait, Jaren, wait.
No?
Chien,
Okay.
are you going to close your class officially? And if anybody wants to stay, we can continue. I guess your class ends at 12:15, right?
Yeah. The class ends at 12:15. So, but we have the last question. So anyone that wants to leave, that's fine. And but we have here a question from Muhit again.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm reading, Muhit, your question. Hold on, I'm going to read it out loud. Will the Uyghur Xinjiang concentration camps impact the China-Pakistan-Turkey diplomatic and economic relations? Are Pakistan and Turkey aware in the situation happening there, and are they taking at least some form of action? I'm expanding here on Devin's question. Yeah, so for Pakistan, Pakistan is so, I mean, it's not my field, but like, you know, it is so dependent on China economically that it is actually almost entirely silent on the Uyghur issue. The China-Pakistan economic corridor is the lifeline of Pakistan's national economy. So it is entirely on China's side. And I think I have to like double check that, but I think they even had a joint declaration with other Muslim majority countries, including the Gulf countries, actually, that stated that we, the Muslim majority countries, support the Chinese states and the non-intervention principle in the Uyghur issue. So Pakistan's attitude towards the Uyghur issue is very clear, right? It is on the Chinese state side. For Turkey, it didn't sign that joint declaration of the Muslim majority countries, and it is like ambivalent on the issue. It is, in my opinion, like trying to play this like balancing game. Let's say that like every time they make an economic agreement with China. Oh, that's one thing that we haven't talked about Turkey-China relations. That Turkey has been going through a deep economic and financial crisis for many years, and China has supported Turkey with direct financial aid multiple times over this period of time. It's called like there's this, technically speaking, the other financial aid, which means that it directly goes into the National Sovereign Fund, which is directly under the control of no other than the president himself. So it's a chunk of money that is unaccounted for, right? We don't know like where it's went to, where it's spent for, and everything, right? So it is actually a direct support, financial support for the current regime, right? So every time the current Turkish government receives such direct financial support from the Chinese states, they say something like, you know, in support of China's foreign policy principles. And a couple of weeks later, one of the lower level bureaucrats or diplomats make a speech at the UN, for example, just to balance its attitude. But of course, on the Chinese side, sees that, right? Sees this ambivalent attitude, and that's one of the reasons that prevents China from fully committing to Turkey as a regional ally in the East Med.
Fascinating.
Thank you. That answered my question.
All right, then I have a couple of questions, but we don't have time, and I have access to Daria and Jaren. I guess we need to end the session here. It was a pleasure to have you here, Daria and Jaren, and thank you, Chen, for opening your class and hosting the event. If you have some final words, please go ahead, and we conclude the session.
Thank you very much for your great, presentations, and also for participating in the event, and for all students here. And we may, keep in touch. And so it's a continuing interest for me. And so maybe someday I'll go to visit Turkey.
Yes.
And, yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and also definitely go to Suzhou, Yeah.
More than welcome.
Yeah.
Yes.
And hopefully when COVID is all over, we will have you in person here.
Yes,
And
yes,
that
yes.
would be a
Yeah, we'd love
nice
to have
treat.
you. Yeah.
Yes, hopefully. But thanks for having us. Yes.
Great questions too. Thank you for the questions as well.
Very smart students. Yes, thank you so much. Appreciate it. We'll see
Yes.
you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.